Crash landing. The night sky was restless, covered in thick, swirling clouds. Thunder cracked like the roar of a beast, and lightning lit up the forest below. Among the chaos, something extraordinary happened. A streak of light tore across the heavens, brighter and faster than anything human made. It wasn't a meteor. It was a ship, spiraling out of control. The ship, sleek and metallic, burned as it crashed through the trees. It hit the ground with a deafening explosion, sending fire and debris in every direction. Animals fled in terror, and the forest went eerily silent, as if holding its breath. From the wreckage, a figure emerged, a woman. She stood slowly, her body trembling, her silver suit torn in places. Her eyes glowed faintly, a soft silver light that seemed alive. She looked human but wasn't. Her movements were graceful, yet there was an unnatural precision to them, like she didn't belong in this world. She scanned the area, her expression calm but confused. A faint hum came from a device on her wrist. She pressed it, and a holographic display flickered to life. Strange symbols, alien and indecipherable, danced across the screen. She stared at them, her glowing eyes narrowing. The symbols meant something important. She knew that much. But her mind felt fractured, as if someone had taken pieces of it away. "I must remember," she whispered, her voice soft but firm. It was the first sound she'd made, and even that startled her. She spoke the language of this planet. But how? The woman took a shaky step forward, then another. Her legs felt heavy, like she hadn't walked in days. She turned back to the wreckage of her ship. The flames crackled, casting eerie shadows across the trees. There was no hope of repairing it. She was stranded, alone, on an unfamiliar world. Then she heard it, a rustling sound in the trees. She froze, her senses sharpening. The sound wasn't natural. It wasn't the wind or an animal. Someone, or something, was watching her. Her hand instinctively moved to her side, where a sleek weapon had once been holstered. It was gone, lost in the crash. She clenched her fists, her silver eyes scanning the darkness. The rustling grew louder, closer. "Who's there?" she called, her voice firm this time. No answer, just the sound of leaves crunching underfoot. She backed away slowly, her glowing eyes flickering as her fear grew. Her mind raced. If the beings on this planet were hostile, she was vulnerable. The trees seemed to close in around her, their dark silhouettes twisting in the dim light of the flames. Then, out of the shadows, a figure appeared. A man. He was young, with messy brown hair and a rugged jacket, holding a flashlight. He froze when he saw her, his eyes wide with shock. What are you?" he asked, his voice shaky but curious. The woman stared at him, unsure of how to respond. Her instincts told her to run, but something in his eyes stopped her. He didn't look threatening. He looked human. "I need help," she said finally, her voice softer now. "Please." The man hesitated, glancing at the wreckage behind her. His flashlight beam moved over the torn metal and flames. "Is that your ship?" he asked, disbelief evident in his tone. She nodded. It was. Before he could say more, the rustling sound returned. This time, it wasn't coming from the man. It was coming from deeper in the forest. The woman's head snapped toward the noise, her body tense. "Something's out there," she whispered. The man's expression shifted from confusion to concern. "This area isn't safe," he said. "There's been talk of military patrols. If they see you—" He didn't finish the sentence, but she understood. "They would take her, study her, maybe even harm her." "I can't stay here," she said. The man looked at her, conflicted. He didn't know who she was or what she wanted, but something about her seemed desperate, lost. He couldn't just leave her. "There's a cabin not far from here," he said finally. "You can hide there for now." The woman hesitated. Trusting a stranger on an unknown planet wasn't wise. But she didn't have a choice. She nodded. "Lead the way." As they moved through the forest, the rustling sound followed them, always just out of sight. The woman's glowing eyes darted around, scanning the darkness. "What's your name?" the man asked as they walked. She opened her mouth to answer but stopped. Her name. She couldn't remember. A wave of frustration washed over her. "I don't know," she admitted. The man glanced at her, his curiosity deepening. "Well, I'm Alex," he offered. She didn't respond, her focus on the forest. The rustling grew louder again. And this time, she caught a glimpse of something. Shapes moving between the trees, fast and unnatural. "Run," she said suddenly, grabbing Alex's arm. He didn't question her. They broke into a sprint, the sound of pursuit growing louder behind them. The woman's glowing eyes brightened as adrenaline coursed through her. She didn't know what was chasing them, but she could feel its intent. It wasn't friendly. As they reached a clearing, the woman turned back, her glowing eyes locking onto the shadows. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, from the darkness, a low guttural growl echoed through the trees. The human encounter. Alex pushed open the door to his small, cluttered cabin, the sound of the old hinges creaking echoing in the quiet of the night. He stepped aside, gesturing for the strange woman to enter. She hesitated, her glowing silver eyes scanning every corner of the space, as if checking for hidden threats. Finally, she stepped in, her movements graceful but wary. Inside, the cabin was dimly lit by a single oil lamp. Books, tools, and half-finished projects were scattered across the wooden floor and the small table near the fireplace. A faint smell of coffee lingered in the air. To Alex, it was home. To her, it was a world of unknowns. "You can sit," Alex offered, pulling a chair out for her. The woman stared at the chair for a moment, as though she had never seen one before. Slowly, she lowered herself onto it, her posture unnaturally straight. Her silver eyes seemed to absorb the faint light in the room, giving her an almost ethereal glow. Alex sat across from her, leaning forward, his elbows on the table. His mind was racing. He had seen a lot of strange things in his life, but nothing like this. She wasn't human, at least not entirely. "What are you?" he asked, breaking the silence. His voice was soft, cautious. The woman tilted her head slightly, as if trying to decipher the question. "I don't know," she admitted. Her voice was calm but carried a weight of uncertainty. "You don't know?" Alex raised an eyebrow. "How you not know what you are?" She looked down at her hands, flexing her fingers as if seeing them for the first time. "My memory, it's fractured. I know pieces, but not the whole. I know I am not from here, not from this planet. But beyond that," she trailed off, frustration flashing in her glowing eyes. Alex ran a hand through his messy hair, unsure of what to say. He had so many questions, but no idea where to start. "Okay," he said finally. "Let's start with what you do remember. Your ship. It wasn't exactly subtle when it crashed. Why were you here?" She shook her head. "I don't remember why I came. I only know I was running. Fleeing from something or someone." "Running from what?" The woman's expression hardened, her glowing eyes narrowing. "I don't know," she said, her voice tinged with frustration. "But I can feel it. They're coming. They won't stop until they find me." Alex leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. This wasn't what he had expected when he went out for a walk tonight. A mysterious alien woman claiming to be on the run from some unknown threat. It sounded like something out of a bad sci-fi movie. "And what happens when they find you?" he asked cautiously. She looked him directly in the eyes, her gaze intense. "If they find me, this planet will burn." Her words sent a chill down Alex's spine. He didn't know whether to believe her or not, but the seriousness in her voice left no room for doubt. Before he could respond, a sudden noise outside the cabin made them both freeze. It was faint, a crunching sound, like boots on gravel. Alex's eyes darted to the window, but all he could see was darkness. The woman stood abruptly, her movements swift and silent. "They're here," she whispered. "Who's here?" Alex asked, his voice low. She didn't answer. Instead, she moved toward the door, her body tense, her glowing eyes scanning the shadows outside. Alex grabbed a flashlight and a rusted hunting knife from the table. "Stay here," he said. "No," she replied firmly. "I won't hide while they hunt." Before Alex could argue, the door burst open, splinters of wood flying into the room. Two figures stepped inside, their forms barely visible in the dim light. They weren't human. Their tall, slender bodies were covered in metallic armor, and their faces were obscured by smooth, featureless helmets. The woman's posture shifted instantly, her fear replaced by something primal and fierce. She raised her hands, and a faint light began to glow from her palms. Alex stumbled back, unsure of what was happening. The intruders didn't hesitate. One of them lunged at the woman, but she moved faster than Alex thought possible. She sidestepped the attack, her glowing hands slamming into the figure's chest. A burst of energy erupted from her palms, sending the attacker flying into the wall. The second figure turned its attention to Alex, who raised his knife instinctively. He knew he was outmatched, but before the attacker could strike, the woman intervened. She grabbed the figure by the arm, twisting it with unnatural strength, and threw it to the ground. The fight was over in seconds. The intruders lay motionless on the floor, their metallic armor sparking faintly. The woman stood over them, her glowing eyes dimming as she took a deep breath. Alex stared at her, his heart pounding. What the hell just happened? "They found me," she said simply. Her voice was calm, but her expression was grim. Alex looked down at the fallen intruders, then back at her. "And who exactly are they?" She met his gaze, her silver eyes unreadable. "They are my past, and if we don't leave now, more will come." Alex didn't need to be told twice. Grabbing his jacket and a backpack, he nodded toward the door. "Then let's go." As they stepped out into the night, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just changed forever. He didn't know who this woman was, or what she was running from. But one thing was clear. He was now a part of something far bigger than himself. Fugitives. The forest was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that sets your nerves on edge. Alex led the way, his flashlight barely piercing through the dense darkness. The woman followed close behind, her movements unnaturally silent, almost as if she floated instead of walked. Her glowing silver eyes darted around, scanning the shadows with a focus that made Alex feel like they weren't alone. "We can't keep running like this," Alex whispered, glancing over his shoulder. His breath came in shallow bursts, the cold night air burning his lungs. She didn't answer immediately, her head tilted slightly, as if listening to something he couldn't hear. "They are still tracking us," she finally said, her voice calm but firm. Alex stopped abruptly, turning to face her. "What do you mean, tracking? How? We've been running for miles, and there's no way they could have kept up." The woman raised her hand, showing the faint glow of the device on her wrist. Strange symbols danced across the small screen, shifting in patterns Alex couldn't make sense of. "Their technology is more advanced than yours. They can sense energy signatures, my energy signature. As long as I'm here, they'll keep coming." Alex groaned, running a hand through his hair. "Great, so you're telling me we're basically sitting ducks. Do you have a plan, or are we just running until they catch us?" The woman's silver eyes flickered slightly, a sign of her own frustration. "There's a way to block the signal," she admitted, lowering her voice. "But I need materials, components to modify this device." She tapped her wristband. "Materials?" Alex raised an eyebrow. "You mean like alien technology? Because I don't exactly have a stash of space gadgets lying around." "Not alien," she replied. "Your technology will suffice. Primitive, but adaptable." Before Alex could respond, a faint hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. The woman froze, her glowing eyes widening. "They're close," she said. Alex's heart skipped a beat. He extinguished the flashlight and grabbed her arm, pulling her toward a cluster of thick bushes. "Stay low," he whispered. The hum grew louder until it was deafening. Above them, a faint light cut through the trees. Alex craned his neck, catching a glimpse of a sleek, black drone hovering silently above the treetops. Its surface was smooth, almost organic, and it emitted a faint blue glow. The woman clenched her fists, her eyes narrowing. "It's a scout," she said. "If it detects us, it will call reinforcements. Then we can't let it see us," Alex whispered back, his voice shaking. The drone hovered for a moment, its glow intensifying as it scanned the area. Alex held his breath, pressing himself deeper into the cold, damp earth. The woman remained perfectly still, her glowing eyes fixed on the machine. After what felt like an eternity, the drone moved on, its hum fading into the distance. Alex exhaled sharply, sitting up and brushing dirt off his jacket. "That was too close," he muttered. The woman stood gracefully, her expression unreadable. "It won't be the last," she said. "We need to move quickly." Alex nodded, but his frustration was starting to show. "Move where? You still haven't told me where we're going or how any of this ends. Are we just running until we drop dead?" The woman hesitated, her glowing eyes flickering again. For a moment, she looked almost vulnerable. "I don't have all the answers," she admitted. "But I know we need to find a place to hide long enough for me to fix this." She tapped the wristband again. Alex sighed, shaking his head. "Fine. There's an old workshop not far from here. Belonged to my dad. It's abandoned, but it's got tools, equipment, maybe something you can use." The woman tilted her head, considering his words. "That will do," she said simply. The journey to the workshop was tense. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig made Alex flinch. He kept glancing over his shoulder, expecting another drone, or worse, to appear at any moment. The woman, on the other hand, moved with a quiet confidence, her glowing eyes constantly scanning the environment. When they finally reached the workshop, Alex felt a small wave of relief. The building was old and weathered, its wooden walls covered in moss. Inside, it smelled of oil and rust, the air thick with dust. "This is it," Alex said, flipping on a dim overhead light. The woman wasted no time. She moved to a workbench, scanning the assortment of tools and scrap metal scattered across its surface. "This will work," she said, picking up a soldering iron and a handful of wires. Alex watched her work, his curiosity getting the better of him. "You're pretty handy for someone who can't remember much about herself," he said, trying to lighten the mood. She didn't look up. "Muscle memory," she replied. "The mind forgets, but the body remembers." As she worked, Alex couldn't help but notice how focused she was. Her hands moved with precision, connecting wires and components in ways that didn't make sense to him. Sparks flew as she soldered pieces together, her glowing eyes reflecting the light. "What exactly are you building?" he asked. "A signal jammer," she said without hesitation. "It will block my energy signature temporarily, long enough for us to plan our next move." Before Alex could respond, a loud crash came from outside. Both of them froze. "They found us," she said, her voice low and steady. Alex grabbed a wrench from the workbench, his heart pounding. "What do we do?" The woman looked at him, her silver eyes glowing brighter than ever. "We fight." Unraveling the past. The old scientist's lab was hidden deep in the woods, tucked away behind an overgrowth of vines and moss. It wasn't much to look at, a small, dilapidated cabin from the outside. But inside, it was a maze of blinking machinery, worn books, and makeshift inventions. The faint hum of generators filled the air, and the flicker of a monitor cast shadows on the cluttered walls. Alex pushed open the heavy door, holding it for the woman as she stepped in. She paused in the doorway, her silver eyes scanning the room, taking in every detail. Her glowing gaze lingered on the machines, her expression a mixture of curiosity and caution. "Are you sure about this guy?" she asked, her voice low. He's eccentric, yeah, Alex admitted, but he knows his stuff. If anyone can help us figure out what's going on, it's Dr. Jonas. As if on cue, a man emerged from behind a towering stack of monitors. His gray hair was wild, and his round glasses were smudged with fingerprints. He wore a lab coat that had seen better days, and his hands were covered in grease and dust. Alex, the man said, his voice a mix of surprise and irritation. You have some nerve showing up after all these years. And what's this about barging in unannounced? Good to see you too, Jonas, Alex said with a grin. Listen, I need your help. It's complicated. Jonas's sharp eyes shifted to the woman standing silently behind Alex. He tilted his head, studying her with the keen curiosity of a scientist. Complicated, you say? I'd call it downright impossible. Who, or what, is she? The woman stepped forward, her posture regal despite the exhaustion etched on her face. My name is unclear, she said, her voice steady. I don't know who I am or why I'm here, but I know I need answers, and he says you can help. Jonas's brow furrowed. He grabbed a pair of tools from a nearby table, gesturing toward a chair. Sit, he said curtly. Let's see what we're dealing with. She hesitated, her glowing eyes narrowing slightly, but Alex gave her a reassuring nod. Reluctantly, she sat down. Jonas worked quickly, attaching sensors to her wrists and temples. The machines around them whirred to life, displaying strange symbols and graphs on their screens. The woman watched the data intently, her expression unreadable. What are you looking for? Alex asked, leaning over Jonas's shoulder. Anything, Jonas replied. Brain activity, energy readings, genetic anomalies, whatever makes her tick. The screens began to fill with data, lines spiking and dipping in chaotic patterns. Jonas's eyes widened as he analyzed the results. Fascinating, he murmured. Her neural pathways are unlike anything I've ever seen. They're layered, almost as if her mind operates on multiple levels simultaneously. What does that mean? Alex asked. It means she's not just an alien, Jonas said, his voice tinged with awe. She's something more. Her biology is a blend of advanced evolution and technology. It's as if she was designed. The woman stiffened at his words. Designed. By whom? Jonas glanced at her, his expression somber. That's the question, isn't it? But here's the real kicker. He pointed to a flashing indicator on the screen. Her energy signature. It's fluctuating wildly. Something is happening inside her. Alex frowned. What does that mean? Jonas hesitated, his gaze shifting between the woman and the screen. I don't know for sure, but it looks like a pregnancy. The energy readings are consistent with the development of a hybrid life form. The room fell silent. The woman's silver eyes widened, a rare flicker of vulnerability crossing her face. Pregnant. She repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. How? That's impossible. Jonas shrugged, his face grim. Impossible or not, the evidence is right here. Whatever's inside you, it's growing fast. And it's not just biological. It's radiating an energy I've never seen before. Alex stepped forward, his concern evident. What does that mean for her? Is it dangerous? Jonas shook his head. I can't say for sure, but if this energy continues to grow unchecked, it could attract more than just the creatures hunting her. This kind of power, it's like a beacon. It could draw attention from across the galaxy. The woman stood abruptly, pulling the sensors off her skin. Then we need to stop it, she said, her voice firm. Jonas raised a hand. Hold on. This energy, this child, it might be the key to understanding who you are and why you're here. Destroying it without knowing the full picture could be a mistake. I don't care about the picture, she snapped. I care about survival. Alex stepped between them, his hands raised. Hey, let's all take a breath, okay? We don't have enough information yet. Let's figure out what we're dealing with before we make any decisions." The woman's glowing eyes softened slightly, and she nodded reluctantly. "Fine," she said. "But we can't stay here. If this energy is a beacon, they'll find us sooner rather than later." Jonas nodded, already packing up his equipment. "You're right. But if we're going to figure this out, we'll need better tech and a safer location. There's a facility a few miles from here, an old lab I used to work at before. Well, before things went south. It's abandoned now, but the equipment there is still functional." Alex exchanged a glance with the woman. "Sounds risky," he said. "Everything about this is risky," Jonas replied. "But if you want answers, that's where we'll find them." The woman took a deep breath, her glowing eyes resolute. "Then let's move. We don't have time to waste." As they prepared to leave, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they were heading straight into the lion's den. Whatever was inside the woman, whatever secrets her past held, was bigger than any of them could imagine. The pursuers. The lab loomed in the distance, a crumbling relic of human ingenuity now swallowed by nature. Vines coiled around rusted beams, and shattered windows glinted faintly in the moonlight. It stood silent and foreboding, a monument to forgotten experiments and abandoned ambitions. "This is the place?" Alex asked, his voice barely a whisper as he adjusted the heavy backpack slung over his shoulder. Jonas nodded, his expression grim. "It's been years, but the equipment should still be functional. At least I hope it is. If not, we're out of options." The woman stood beside them, her glowing silver eyes fixed on the building. She was silent, her body tense like a coiled spring. Something about the air felt wrong, heavy with an unnatural energy. "We're not alone," she said suddenly, her voice cut through the quiet like a blade. Alex and Jonas froze. "What do you mean?" Alex asked, scanning the shadows around them. She turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "I can feel them. They're close." "Great," Alex muttered, gripping the wrench he had taken to carrying since their journey began. Because things weren't complicated enough already. Jonas adjusted his glasses and motioned toward the lab. "Inside. Now, if they're coming, we'll have a better chance holding them off from there." The three of them hurried toward the building, their footsteps crunching softly against the overgrown gravel path. As they entered, the scent of rust and mildew hit them, a sharp reminder of the lab's decay. Inside, the lab was a chaotic mix of broken machinery and half-functional consoles. Faded diagrams and charts clung to the walls, their once bright colors dulled by time. Jonas wasted no time, moving to a control panel and flipping switches. The lights flickered weakly, casting long, eerie shadows across the room. "This will do," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "If I can get the main generator running, we'll have enough power to scan her properly. Maybe even figure out what's drawing them to her." The woman stood near a cracked window, her eyes scanning the forest outside. "We don't have much time," she said. "They're moving fast." Alex joined her, peering out into the darkness. At first, he saw nothing, but then his eyes caught faint, shifting shapes in the distance. They moved unnaturally, their forms blending with the shadows, as if they were part of the darkness itself. "What are they?" he whispered. "They're hunters," the woman replied, her voice low. "Their purpose is simple: to track, capture, or kill. They won't stop until they have me, or what's inside me." Jonas, oblivious to the growing tension, muttered to himself as he worked on the generator. Sparks flew, and the hum of machinery grew louder. "Got it," he exclaimed. "Systems are online. Bring her over here. I'll need to take a full scan tow." He stopped mid-sentence as a deafening crash echoed through the lab. The door they had entered moments ago was gone, replaced by a gaping hole. In its place stood three figures, their tall, angular forms cloaked in shimmering armor. Their eyes glowed a deep red, and strange blade-like weapons extended from their arms. The woman stepped forward, her glowing silver eyes meeting their crimson ones. "Leave," she said, her voice steady and cold. The lead hunter tilted its head, emitting a guttural, mechanical growl. "Surrender," it said, its voice distorted and alien. "The child belongs to us." Alex felt a chill run down his spine. "What do they mean? The child belongs to them?" he whispered to Jonas. The older man shook his head, his face pale. "I don't think we want to find out." The hunters didn't wait for a response. The lead figure lunged forward, its blade slicing through the air. The woman reacted instantly, her movements fluid and precise. She sidestepped the attack, her hands glowing with a faint light. With a swift motion, she struck the hunter's chest, sending it flying backward into the wall. The other two hunters advanced, their weapons gleaming in the dim light. Alex and Jonas scrambled for cover as the lab erupted into chaos. Sparks flew as the hunters' blades sliced through equipment, and the woman fought with a ferocity that left Alex in awe. But it wasn't enough. For every blow she landed, the hunters seemed to recover faster, their movements relentless and coordinated. The lead hunter, now back on its feet, joined the fray, its crimson eyes locked on the woman. "We can't stay here." Alex shouted over the noise, ducking as a piece of shrapnel flew past his head. Jonas pointed to a side door. "There's an escape tunnel. It leads to the river. It's our only chance." The woman hesitated, her glowing eyes flickering as she glanced between the hunters and the door. "Go," she said. "I'll hold them off." "Are you insane?" Alex yelled. "You can't fight them alone." She turned to him, her expression softening for the first time. "I can't let them take me. If they get the child, it's over." Alex clenched his fists, torn between logic and instinct. "We're not leaving you," he said finally. Jonas grabbed his arm. "We don't have time for this. If we all die here, it's over anyway." The woman glanced back at the hunters, who were already recovering. "Go," she repeated, her voice firm. Reluctantly, Alex nodded. "We'll come back for you," he said. A faint smile touched her lips. "I'll hold you to that." With that, Alex and Jonas sprinted toward the escape tunnel, leaving the woman to face the hunters alone. As they disappeared into the darkness, the sounds of battle echoed behind them, a haunting reminder of the sacrifice she was making. The child's power. The tunnel was dark, damp, and narrow. Every sound echoed endlessly. The drip of water from the ceiling, the crunch of Alex's boots against the gravel, and Jonas's labored breathing. The two men hurried forward, their path lit only by the dim glow of Alex's flashlight. Behind them, the distant echoes of battle still rumbled faintly. "How long does this tunnel go?" Alex asked, his voice hushed but urgent. Jonas glanced over his shoulder, his face pale and streaked with dirt. "It should lead to the river," he said between gasps. "From there, we can follow the current and put as much distance as possible between us and those things." Alex slowed for a moment, his heart heavy. "We left her behind," he muttered. "She can't fight them alone." Jonas stopped abruptly, spinning to face Alex. "You think I wanted to leave her? You saw those things. They weren't going to stop. She gave us a chance to survive, and you're wasting it standing here second-guessing." Alex opened his mouth to argue, but a faint rumble from the direction of the lab made him freeze. It wasn't the sound of machinery or collapsing debris. It was something else, something alive. Jonas heard it too. "Move," he hissed, grabbing Alex's arm and dragging him forward. They pushed deeper into the tunnel, the oppressive darkness pressing in around them. After what felt like an eternity, they emerged into the open air. The tunnel had deposited them on the banks of a wide, rushing river. The moonlight reflected off the water, providing just enough light to navigate. Jonas dropped his pack and rummaged through it, pulling out a battered old map. "If we follow the river downstream, we'll hit a small town. We can regroup there, maybe find a way to." He stopped mid-sentence, his eyes widening as the ground beneath them began to tremble. "What now?" Alex muttered, gripping his wrench tightly. The tremor grew stronger, the vibrations rattling the nearby trees. Suddenly, a burst of light erupted from the forest behind them. Alex shielded his eyes, his heart racing. "She's still fighting," he said, more to himself than to Jonas. But as the light faded, a figure emerged from the tree line. It wasn't the woman. It was one of the hunters. Its sleek, metallic body glistened in the moonlight, and its crimson eyes glowed with an unrelenting intensity. It moved toward them with an almost predatory grace, its weapon already extending from its arm. Jonas stumbled back, tripping over a rock. "Run!" he shouted. Alex stood frozen, his mind racing. There was no time to run. The hunter was too fast. Just as it raised its blade, preparing to strike, a brilliant flash of silver light erupted behind it. The hunter froze mid-motion, its body convulsing as if caught in an invisible grip. Alex blinked, his eyes struggling to adjust to the sudden brightness. Standing behind the hunter was the woman, her silver eyes blazing with an intensity he had never seen before. Her entire body seemed to radiate energy, and her hands were outstretched, glowing like molten metal. The hunter let out a mechanical screech as its body began to disintegrate, piece by piece. Within moments, it was gone, reduced to nothing but a faint shimmer in the air. Alex stared at her, stunned. You made it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She turned to him, her glowing eyes still bright but softening. "I told you I'd hold them off. I didn't say I'd lose." Jonas scrambled to his feet, his eyes darting between her and the spot where the hunter had stood. "What did you do?" he demanded. "That wasn't just a fight. You obliterated it." The woman lowered her hands, the glow fading slowly. She looked down at herself, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. "It wasn't me," she admitted. "It was the child." Alex stepped closer, his brow furrowed. "The child? What do you mean?" She placed a hand over her abdomen, her expression conflicted. "During the fight, I felt something. A surge of energy, unlike anything I've ever known. It wasn't coming from me. It was coming from inside." Jonas adjusted his glasses, his scientific curiosity overriding his fear. "That would explain the energy fluctuations I saw earlier. The child isn't just growing. It's evolving. It's tapping into power far beyond anything we understand." The woman nodded slowly. "I don't think it's a threat. But it's aware. It acted to protect me, to protect us." Alex ran a hand through his hair, trying to process everything. "So what does that mean? Is this child some kind of weapon?" She shook her head. "It's not a weapon. It's something new. A bridge between my kind and yours." Before anyone could respond, another rumble shook the ground. This time, it wasn't distant. The remaining hunters had found them. "They're not stopping," Alex said, gripping his wrench tightly. The woman's silver eyes flared again, and she turned toward the forest. "Then neither am I." Jonas grabbed her arm. "Wait, you can't keep using that power. If the child is amplifying you, it could burn you out, or worse." She pulled free, her expression resolute. "If I don't, we won't survive. And neither will this child." She stepped forward, her body glowing brighter with each step. Alex and Jonas watched as the hunters emerged from the trees, their crimson eyes locking onto her. This time, she didn't wait for them to attack. She raised her hands, and a shockwave of silver light erupted from her body, tearing through the forest like a tidal wave. The hunters didn't stand a chance. When the light faded, she collapsed to her knees, her breathing ragged. Alex ran to her side, his heart pounding. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. She looked up at him, her silver eyes dim but steady. "I'm fine," she said, "but we need to keep moving. This is far from over." Alex helped her to her feet, his mind racing. Whatever this child was, it was powerful and dangerous. But it was also their only hope. Final stand. The air was thick with tension as the group moved along the riverbank, the forest on either side shrouded in shadows. The woman leaned heavily on Alex, her glowing silver eyes dim but still watchful. Each step she took seemed like a battle, her strength clearly waning. "How much further?" Alex asked, glancing at Jonas, who was scanning the map with a flashlight. Jonas frowned, his weathered face etched with worry. "There's an old dam about a mile from here. If we can get there, it might give us a defensible position. We'll need every advantage we can get if they come at us again." The woman straightened, pulling herself free of Alex's support. "They will come," she said, her voice soft but certain. "They always come." Alex looked at her, his concern evident. "You can't keep fighting like this. Whatever power the child is giving you, it's taking too much from you." "I don't have a choice," she replied, her gaze fixed ahead. "If they take me, or the child, it's over. For all of us." Her words hung heavy in the air, silencing any further argument. They pressed on, the sounds of the rushing river masking their footsteps. The dam. When they reached the dam, it was clear that time had not been kind to it. The massive structure was cracked and weathered, its once pristine metal supports now rusted and worn. Still, it was imposing, rising high above the forest floor and offering a vantage point that could buy them precious time. "This will do," Jonas said, surveying the area. He pointed to an access stairwell. "Up there. If we can get to the control room, we might be able to activate the floodgates. It could slow them down if they try to cross." Alex nodded. "Let's move." As they climbed the stairs, the woman paused, her hand gripping the railing. Her silver eyes flickered faintly, and she winced, pressing a hand to her abdomen. Alex stopped beside her. "Hey, are you okay?" She nodded, though her face was pale. "The child is responding. It knows they're close." Jonas overheard and turned, his expression a mix of fascination and concern. "Responding how? Is it communicating with you?" The woman hesitated. "Not in words. It's more like a feeling, a sense of urgency, of danger. It wants to protect itself." Alex exchanged a glance with Jonas. "Let's just hope it can." The hunters arrive. They barely made it to the control room before the hunters appeared. From the high vantage point, Alex spotted them first, 5 figures moving through the trees below. Their sleek metallic bodies reflected the faint moonlight, and their crimson eyes glowed with unrelenting purpose. "They're here," Alex said, his voice tense. The woman stepped forward, her glowing eyes narrowing as she surveyed the approaching figures. "This is it," she said, her tone resolute. "They won't stop until we finish this." Jonas was already at the controls, frantically flipping switches and typing commands into an ancient console. "If I can get the floodgates open, it'll buy us time. But it's going to take a few minutes." "We don't have a few minutes," Alex muttered, gripping his wrench tightly. The hunters were fast. Within moments, they were scaling the dam's supports, their movements unnaturally fluid. The woman stepped to the edge of the platform, her hands beginning to glow. "Get behind me," she said. Alex hesitated but obeyed, pulling Jonas back as well. The first hunter reached the platform, its blade-like weapon gleaming in the moonlight. It lunged at the woman, but she moved with inhuman speed, sidestepping the attack and striking its chest with a burst of silver light. The hunter staggered but didn't fall. "They're stronger," she said, her voice tight. Another hunter joined the first, then another, until all 5 were on the platform, circling her like predators. Alex felt his heart race as he watched. She was outnumbered, and it was clear that the energy she was using was draining her. One of the hunters lunged again, and this time, the woman didn't dodge. Instead, she raised her hand, and a massive wave of energy erupted from her palm, knocking all 5 hunters backward. The force of the blast shook the platform, and Alex had to grab onto a railing to keep from falling. Jonas shouted over the noise, "I need 30 more seconds. Make it fast." Alex yelled back. The hunters recovered quickly, their crimson eyes glowing brighter. One of them raised its arm, and a projectile shot out, heading straight for the woman. She deflected it with a shield of light, but the effort made her stagger. Alex couldn't stand by any longer. Gripping his wrench, he charged at one of the hunters, swinging with all his strength. The blow connected, denting the creature's armor, but it barely seemed to notice. It turned toward him, its blade raised. Before it could strike, the woman intervened, sending another burst of energy that sent the hunter crashing into the wall. "I told you to stay back," she said, her voice strained, "and let you do this alone." Alex shot back. Not a chance. The child awakens. Just as the hunters regrouped for another attack, the woman cried out, doubling over. A blinding light emanated from her, brighter than anything they had seen before. Jonas turned from the console, shielding his eyes. "What's happening?" "It's the child," she said through gritted teeth. "It's waking up." The light grew more intense, enveloping her completely. The hunters froze, their crimson eyes flickering as if confused. Then, with a deafening roar, the light exploded outward, engulfing the entire platform. Alex felt himself lifted off his feet and thrown backward, the world spinning around him. When the light faded, the hunters were gone, reduced to nothing but ash. The platform was intact, but the woman was on her knees, her body trembling. Alex rushed to her side. "Are you okay?" She looked up at him, her silver eyes now glowing faintly. "It's done," she said softly. "The child protected us." Jonas approached cautiously, but at what cost? That kind of power, it's dangerous. The woman placed a hand on her abdomen, a faint smile touching her lips. "It's not dangerous. It's life. A new kind of life." Alex helped her to her feet, his mind racing with questions. But for now, one thing was clear: they had survived. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, the three of them stood together, battered but alive. The fight wasn't over, but they had won this battle. And the child, whatever it was, had given them a chance to keep fighting.